Okay, so continuing on to an archetypal and mythological analysis of Hamlet. And the title of this section on page 160 of the article, The Sacrificial Hero, Hamlet. So to do such an analysis, Gilbert Murray, a fairly well-known scholar, decides to probe the origins of Hamlet. And in fact, Hamlet isn't something Shakespeare made up. It was perhaps a well-known story of revenge that goes way back into early Scandinavian lore, maybe even into Icelandic sagas. The original name being Amlodi, and in Murray's words, he explains how there is this universal appeal to the story of Hamlet. Quote, "The things that thrill and amaze us in Hamlet are not any historical particulars about medieval Elsinore, but things belonging to the old stories and the old magic rites, which stirred and thrilled our forefathers 5,000 and 6,000 years ago, set them dancing all night on the hills, tearing beasts and men in pieces, and giving up their own bodies to a ghastly death, in hope thereby to keep the green world from dying, and to be the saviors of their own people." End quote. That quote here is very much in line with what Fraser was talking about and his exploration of ancient rituals, ancient magical practices. Murray is saying that in the olden days, we're talking primal Scandinavian days, they would perform rituals that were meant to spill blood, and there was the idea that blood could regenerate and revitalize the earth in wintertime during that intense period of anxiety, during the solstice time when it appeared that the sun was going further and further down on the horizon, perhaps never to return again. So when we look at Hamlet and we feel excited by it, and like so many generations have felt thrilled and amazed by some scenes in Hamlet, he's saying that that same primal feeling we get goes all the way back to our early ancestors. The same thing that thrilled them back in the olden days is what is affecting us here and now. Shakespeare was a master at eliciting such responses. Shakespeare also was very in tune with the symbolic mind of his culture and the Elizabethan era. The article points out how the Elizabethans were a very myth-minded culture. That they would have recognized a lot of the things that were going on in Hamlet, things that we probably don't recognize today. Shakespeare also points out Gilbert Murray also points out how Shakespeare was following similar patterns as found in Oedipus. And I will quote on page 161, the block quote here says that in both plays, both Oedipus and Hamlet, a royal sufferer is associated with pollution in its very sources of an entire social order. Both plays open with an invocation for the well-being of the endangered body politic. In both, the destiny of the individual and of society are closely intertwined, and in both the suffering of the royal victim seems to be necessary for purgation and renewal, before purgation and renewal can be achieved. Looking at that quote, we see the royal sufferer associated with pollution of the entire social order. Hamlet intuits this at the beginning, right in conjunction with the opening in Act 1, Scene 2 of Claudius in making an invocation for the well-being of the state. he says everything is fine, but in fact we know Fortinbras is on the move, and there's something wrong with this Hamlet guy dressed in black and brooding and complaining about being too closely in the sun. We also quickly learn in the next act, when the ghost charges Hamlet to take revenge, we see how he is bearing the responsibility of all of Denmark, how Hamlet, the individual, is responsible for cleansing the evils that have been introduced to Denmark, to society. And perhaps in order to fulfill that revenge, Hamlet's life might be required. Another quote that I think is great, I'll read it on the bottom of page 161, and this comes again from this critic, Philip Wheelwright, a mythologist. He says, quote, "Good is life, vitality, propagation, health. Evil is death, impotence, disease." And my words here, he's speaking symbolically. Of these several terms, health and disease are the most important and comprehensive. Death is but an interim evil. It occurs periodically, but there is an assurance of new life ever springing up to take its place. The normal cycle of life and death is a healthy cycle, and the purpose of the major seasonal festivals, for example, the festival of Dionysus, where plays like Oedipus were performed. These festivals, at the heart of them, the purpose of them was at least as much to celebrate joyfully the turning wheel of creative nature as to achieve magical effects. Disease and blight, however, interrupt the cycle. They are the real destroyers, and health is the good most highly to be prized. So, the diseased nature of Denmark is figuring prominently as one of the major motifs in Hamlet. Something is rotten in the state of Denmark. And Philip Wheelwright is pointing out that, life and death are, good and evil opposing one another, but that death is something that it's natural. The real problem comes when there is disease, and that disease is some kind of corruption that could interfere with the healthy cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Wheelwright points out that the murder in Hamlet of Hamlet Sr., who becomes the ghost, this is what screws with the natural cycle, and it poisons the political state, and the social organism is a term used, and it spreads disease, and Hamlet himself is feeling this, his melancholy, his depressed nature, his questioning of the Renaissance ideals. And certainly you see Polonius' daughter Ophelia being affected by the disease. In fact, few people are able to escape it.